Okay, Alhamdulillah, Alameen, Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. This is episode 3 of the podcast, The Forward, and myself, Brother Mahdi Locke. I'm again here with Marcus from Indiana, and we are doing a post-election analysis of regarding what has recently happened in the United States, looking at it from a Middle Eastern perspective, also looking at Muslims' views on the issue, Christian views on the issue, in order to provide a alternative perspective and a broader viewpoint for our listeners. Now, Marcus, would you like to start off with some of the topics that we'd like to discuss?
Yeah, just well, obviously, I think the big question is how did this happen? Why certain people didn't see it happen? Why some people did see it happen? But I think maybe a good segue into it is Michael Moore, his documentary Trump Land. He was kind of explaining why some of the blue collar worker were heavily supporting Trump. Obviously he spent a lot of time in Detroit, and he saw something there, and but what he's said in that there's a little 4-minute segment that kind of got really popular on YouTube. But he mentioned that. He mentioned that a lot of people were attracted to Trump because Trump was going after the same enemies, the establishment, the established media, the established politicians,
Wall Street, corporate
Wall
America,
Street,
yeah.
And that kind of drew people, kind of unified people, and kind of drew them together because they felt like that those were the enemies that were responsible for their lives, losing jobs, wages going down, so on and so forth. So. And I think that's actually pretty true and insightful because also in the evangelical conservative world, I noticed that there was something interesting happening. It seemed like a lot of the establishment, like Russell Moore of Southern Baptist Convention, he's kind of he's a leader. Some of the established publications like Christianity Today, they tend to be really anti-Trump. And but it seemed like but Trump polled the majority of evangelical voters, and of course they make up a huge percentage of the electorate. Trump actually had, in this one article I'm reading here, actually this was in February 2016 during the primaries, but Trump actually took 42% of the conservative evangelicals. Cruz had 34%. So what was happening there, and I think that it boils down to that people are actually more concerned about economics, their jobs and opportunities, more than they are, well, does this candidate talk like me, look like me, say the same things that I do, so forth. I think economics, jobs, and opportunities is more important. And it's not more important to the kind of established leaders. They're more concerned about how godly or whatever.
Well, that kind of reminds me of something that Wayne Allen Root said. They said that Republicans sign the backs of checks. No, they sign They sign the fronts of checks, and then the Democrats sign the backs of them. Right? They cash them, and Republicans tend to pay them. So Republicans, he said, a lot of Republicans are more in tune with the basic day-to-day runnings of things, and they know what is required to run a business, what is required to employ people, what is required to pay bills and pay rent and pay mortgages. So the people who are in tune with that we're more attracted to them because that's within people's sphere of influence as opposed to your sphere of concern, right? So other things like whatever it is, climate change or terrorism or so forth would be secondary to the basic fundamental needs of people to get by in life. People want jobs, and people want not just to have jobs, which is surviving, but people want to thrive. I think people have higher expectations of America, and that's why I think one of the videos I saw recently, I believe it was Stefan Molyneux talking to Bill Mitchell, who's the expert on polls. He said people have higher expectations in the United States. People have expectations not just about getting by. People want to win. They want to win, and that's Trump's strong message was all about winning.
Yeah.
Winning until you get sick of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, it seems like especially with these evangelical conservative leaders, the establishment, however you want to put it, it seems like it's more identity politics, more and more. And I think the people aren't really into that. But this article that I was referencing is also talking about why evangelicals were so attracted to Trump. And interestingly, it was mentioning that they actually saw him as a sort of a prophet, which is really, really, really strange. But it has to do with
the Samson Jezebel thing.
Yeah,
that kind of comparison.
Like how he understood what the real problem is. Like he was able to see through the narrative of the established media, and he saw the true narrative, and he understood what the real issues were, what the real problems were. And people always said he spoke the truth, quote unquote, even though he got a lot of his facts wrong a lot of times, or he exaggerated the facts and so forth. But he spoke I think it was more of he is the way that he spoke.
I think the fact that he had his ear to the ground. Like I said in the last podcast we did, that he actually hired people to listen to talk radio for several years before he ran his campaign. So he knew what issues people were worried about. He knew that people were worried about jobs. People were worried about immigration. People were worried about terrorism to a certain extent. And also gathering that people were not too keen on political correctness and these things. So by coming from that approach and just ripping up the script, so to speak, his effective use of social media, using his Twitter account very, very effectively. I saw today that he's, for the last month, because on Twitter he has about 13 million followers, his Twitter impressions, meaning like how many times of his tweets actually been viewed by people, is up to 2.2 billion.
Wow. So
he's having a major effect, and he completely manhandled the quote unquote mainstream media, your CNN and your MSNBC. He completely manhandled them in the sense that he used them for his own publicity, and now he just tosses them aside when they try to come to him. When he met Obama the other day at the White House, he actually just got on a plane afterwards and left with his entourage without telling anyone. And Wolf Blitzer was throwing a fit on CNN. But but the thing is, Trump has his way of doing things. He has his direct way of getting across his message, which was very, very effective. But the takeaway now, looking back at it, is that the mainstream media, corporate media, has absolutely failed, and the academics have failed. They did not see this coming. They didn't tell their people that this was coming. So now, just like Brexit, just like the UK election 2015, you've got millions of people who are in utter shock as to how this came about. And it's all the same people who've relied on the mainstream media. They thought that Trump was Hitler or he was Mussolini, that he would never win, he would never be elected. And now it's actually happened. Now he is officially the president-elect. I was explaining to you earlier, there's that argument that Scott Adams wrote. He said the cognitive dissonance of it all is where these people like to think of themselves as well-informed, highly educated, in tune with events, and therefore there's no way Trump's going to win because he's Hitler. No one's going to vote for him, and now he's in. And what does that mean? Does that mean that we got it wrong? Does that mean that we're ill-informed, and so many people voted for Trump? And maybe that means that he's not Hitler or the Antichrist. Or could it be that I'm wrong, and therefore that goes against my presumption of myself, and therefore they're completely flipping out about this. But it's not actually as bad as people think it is. If you don't rely on the mainstream media, you know exactly why this happens. And we discussed this in the previous podcast. It's like I made those references to Mega Mindset, the book by Mike Cernovich, explaining, because he was one of the first people to see this coming maybe 17, 18 months ago, when he said that Trump would win on those grounds. It's like, if he's just going to be masculine, not ashamed to be masculine, he's just going to be not ashamed to be white, he's not going to care about political correctness, he's not going to care about the press, and just go forward, that's going to attract a lot of people and carry him all the way to the White House.
Yeah, and I think something else, you mentioned the political correctness. Yeah, I mean, obviously the narrative in the media was that he's a bigot, sexist,
Six herb.
Islamophobe, homophobe, everything phobe, Muslim hater, and so forth. But so so the question is always, well, why would why? I guess a lot of people's analysis was that okay, so I guess we have a country that's half racist and bigots and so forth. But I think a lot of people, what appealed to Trump was that he saw through all that. And a lot of people saw through that. There's an interesting article here in Arab News, which is based. Arab News is a publication based in Saudi Arabia, and it's by Ray Hanania. I think that's how you say his name. But anyway, he was talking about the incident that happened where Trump talked about temporary banning refugees or Muslim refugees from coming to America, and so the media really took that, and that's how he became an Islamophobic or Muslim hater. But he's talking about in his article. He said that when that happened, that was in the context of you had the terrorist attack by the husband-wife team
On San Bernardino, yeah.
yeah, and right after that. Then you had the FBI. I don't know. I can't remember who it was, but some high-ranking FBI officer came out and said, "Well, we can't really. It's difficult for us to differentiate or detect, who is a terrorist and who is not.
We can't properly vet these people." Yeah.
Yeah, and then so, in context of that, then Trump comes out and says we need a temporary ban on just those refugees coming in, and then he puts it nicely. He says that Trump's statement was quickly exploited by his Democratic rival Hillary Clinton and her allies, who used it to portray Trump as an intolerant racist hater. Muslims in America and around the world, and Arabs too, were dragged into a vicious debate that twisted Trump's intentions and hardened the racist angle of a ban. The Muslims and Arabs do what they always do in politics: respond with emotion rather than strategic reason and dialogue. I thought he put that pretty nicely, and I'm actually shocked that a writer for Arab News could see through that. And I think most voters actually saw through that. Most voters did not see that as a racist comment. They see it as common sense. That's just good, strong leadership. And also in that context was the Obama administration refusing to even use the word Islamic at all. And so of course that scared a lot of people, and people naturally felt unsafe.
Yeah, well, I've expanded my blog, like a few in the articles I wrote, like the quote-unquote Religion of Peace article, my cultural Marxism article, my recent one on spirit cooking, and the inhuman reign of the lie. This point about Muslims in the West get caught into this whole dichotomy of, politicians are going to be pro-Islam or anti-Islam, and if they're pro-Islam, they're going to say Islam is religion of peace, and if they're anti-Islam, they're going to say Islam is ISIS, and no one's going to actually say something in the middle and say that no, the truth is that Islam is a religion. It's also a system of governance. It's more than what you would normally understand to be religion. And the fact that, but once you have that dichotomy, you can no longer have a constructive criticism, right? So when Donald Trump comes out and says, we do have a problem here, we have a problem with certain Muslims who are violent, who have violent understandings, who have a totalitarian mindset, and this is not a lie. It's not making this up. I mean, when the FBI found the documents in Arabic of the Muslim Brotherhood explaining how they're going to take over the United States through the top-down approach, this isn't made up fantasy land. This is real stuff. But he got maligned for it, and that sort of pushed a lot of Muslims in the West, because the Muslims in the West are also panicking now, in America they're panicking now, but that pushed them all towards Hillary. But then they totally forget who Hillary Clinton is, and her policies towards Muslims, what she did to Libya, what she did to Iraq, what her policies are now doing to Syria. That's out the window. So people get caught in this situation where rhetoric actually is worth more and is more important than actual actions. Actions speak louder than words. Like, well, look what she's actually done to the Muslim world. Trump hasn't actually killed anyone. He's not bombed anyone. Yeah. It's like I was watching. There's Barack Obama's brother, Malik Obama. He's a Muslim. He's his older brother, half brother, and he's a Trump supporter. And he came out with like maybe a month before the election on Twitter, that his actual title page of his Twitter feed says, my brother's reign as president is coming to an end, so now I can be open with it.
Oh,
Trump all the way.
wow.
And he's got a really, really interesting sense of humor. So he just kept saying things about Barack Obama, about honest criticism of Barack Obama, honest praise of Trump. And then someone came along on his Twitter feed and said, "Wow, you're amazing. You keep dropping truth bombs." And he said, "No, don't get confused. I'm not my brother. I don't drop bombs on anyone.
Yeah.
I'm just an honest person saying the truth." And so I mean, that's an example of a Muslim in America seeing right through it, understanding the rhetoric. But it's the fact, and I made this point. I don't understand why Muslims get caught up in this stuff where they know that the media lies about them. They know that CNN and The Guardian, the BBC, and New York Times, they know that they lie about them, but then they assume that those same organizations are going to be 100% honest in everything else. And the principle is no. If someone's been proven to be untrustworthy in one issue or in one area, then you should be wary of them in every other issue, in every other area. So I did have a chat with a friend of mine who's from New York. He's a Muslim brother from New York, and he's probably 50 years old. He knows the score from way back when. So I asked him, I said, what's wrong with this Muslim leadership? Why did they actually think that Hillary Clinton would be good for them in the first place? Why did they think that Trump was never going to win? Why did they never see Trump coming? Why were they so out of it? Why did they just come out with the same nonsense? And they did. There was a website called Seekers Hub where about 12 Muslim leaders in the United States gave their thoughts on Trump, and they all start off with the same premise that it's bad and it's not the guy we wanted to win. And he got back to me and he said, it's not necessarily that they're ignorant. It's not necessarily about being just ill-informed, but he said it has more to just being cowardly and being co-opted and being bought out, because a lot of those people, I mean, you might have similar stories within the evangelical Christian community, but I'm saying for these people, all the Muslim leaders out in America, it is about money. It is about, you're going along to get along, and therefore you don't want to say certain things that would get you disinvited from the big conferences, that would get you disinvited from speaking at certain events, that would get you disinvited or not allowed to write in certain publications, and therefore you're going to derail your gravy train. No one's going to do that. So that's another huge factor to bear in mind. And like I said to you before, the funding for a lot of those groups in the United States, like I told you before, a lot of those organizations in the United States are Muslim Brotherhood front organizations. Their funding is coming from the Gulf. And if you are going to be, you're supposed to be a Sunni Orthodox Muslim, but you're trying to make a living out of it, that funding has to keep rolling. So if that funding is going to keep rolling, you're going to go along to get along, which is a very, very unfortunate situation. So I honestly, I feel sorry for a lot of the Muslims out there in the U.S. because they've been led along a garden path. They were not kept abreast of things. They were they were in that PC bubble. They were made to think that everyone loves us, and if anyone criticizes us in any way, shape, or form, we can just dismiss it as bigotry, as Islamophobia, as racism, or whatever. We never have to deal with it. Trump will never win because he's a racist, fascist, bigot, blah, 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 blah. And now he's won, and now it's just a huge slap in the face, and realizing, okay, now we're actually going to have to have conversation, we're going to have dialogue, people are going to be asking us questions, and we're just wholly unprepared because we never ever thought this would happen.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. Michael Moore came out the other day. I think he's on Joe Morning with Joe or something like that on MSNBC, and he was actually defending the Trump voter. He was making the argument that they are not racist. They're actually great people. And I'm just wondering if he's doing that because they realize that the Democratic Party used to stand for the unions, used to stand for the working man, for the blue collar, and he's afraid that, man, if we lose this segment of the demographic, then we're in trouble. And maybe he's trying to. Maybe he's realizing we shouldn't use that kind of rhetoric anymore because we're going to isolate them, and we'll never get them back.
Because they called it. I saw it. They called it the Blue Wall. You know, that area of like
Yeah,
Wisconsin,
yeah,
Wisconsin, Michigan, all those trade union places, and the fact that once those states, once it became apparent on election night that those states were actually turning red, that's over.
Yeah,
It's over. I mean, if those people, like Bill Mitchell said, if those people in those states, you know, that's what they call the Rust Belt. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
If Trump manages to help those people out and get them jobs, and they actually do better 4 years from now and so forth,
If he actually
it's
goes
over.
if he goes into Michigan and starts, to improve things, it could be over. But going back to this article, it's called "Reason Not Emotion with Trump Can Save Palestine." It's interesting because this guy Ray Hanania, or whatever, he's making this argument. He says that Trump actually has a connection with Palestine. I guess this guy named, let me look down here. There's a guy named Farouk. I think it's pronounced Farouk Shami.
Probably Farouk Shami, yeah.
Farouk Shami. And this guy's a Palestinian entrepreneur. I guess he makes hair products, and I guess Trump really used him a lot in the beauty pageants, with the hair products and so forth. And so he's had a connection with Palestine, and he's been over there, and obviously understands the the situation. But Trump actually came out and said that he says that, quote unquote, he wants to be a neutral guy in this whole process. And this quote here is really interesting. Trump says, "You understand a lot of people have gone down in flames trying to make that deal." Speaking of the Palestinian
Israeli thing, yeah.
So I don't want to say whose fault it is. I don't think that helps. That's probably the toughest deal in the world right now to make. It's possible. It's not makeable because, don't forget, it has to last. And, pretty simple language, but, somewhat profound. He understands the situation. And so, anyway, I just think there's definitely different...
It's a different perspective as well, because I looked at the news about which countries in the Middle East and Muslim world, North Africa, were more for Trump, and the ones that were more for Trump were the ones that have been mostly affected by the policies of previous administrations, right? So you found Egypt, Syria, Iraq, and Palestine. Those countries especially were far more pro-Trump than anywhere else, right? Gulf countries more pro-Clinton because I think they own her.
Yeah.
Countries like Morocco were more pro-Hillary Clinton, but I think that's because they've never experienced it directly. That they don't really. Morocco's like a beacon of stability in the Middle East and then in the North Africa. But those countries, like you mentioned before, like General Sisi, they know, and the Egyptian people, the majority of the Egyptian people, they've seen the effects of the Muslim Brotherhood. They've seen how they rule. They're not impressed, and they're happy to have Trump. And that's why, like when Trump was confirmed as the victor. I think maybe within 12 hours, Sisi had already sent congratulations, looking forward to working with him. Vladimir Putin was the same. One of Bashar al-Assad's advisors said that we want to reach out. And, of course, on the left, they'd be like, oh my God, see, look, all the tyrants want to speak to him. No, it's not the point. All the tyrants are now, if these are the people that are the quote-unquote tyrants, they're actually saying, we want to cooperate. And this in addition to the fact that even Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, as well as the Mexican leader, they've also said that they want to renegotiate NAFTA. All these things are coming into effect just with him being elected. So there's a lot of optimism.
Yeah.
And it's definitely, and again, it's not about getting overexcited. It's just recognizing the fact that this is a huge breakaway from the typical Bush-Clinton way of doing things, because everyone knew what that was going to be. That was going to be more of the same, if not accelerated. And this is a breakaway from it. This is a new path to beat, hopefully.
Yeah, I think I was reading this article by the Daily News in Egypt, and Egypt's perspective on Trump, and it seems to be pretty positive. There's a guy, I can't pronounce his Muslim names, but it looks like it's Nader al-Sharqawi.
Yeah, Nader. Like if he's a Christian, they'll probably pronounce his name as Nader.
Nader, okay.
Yeah, but it might be Nader as well.
Nader, yeah.
Meaning unique or rare.
Yeah. Okay, and I guess he's a Secretary General of the Free Egyptians Party, but he was thinking that Trump is a better alternative than Obama for several reasons, but a couple of them is the fact that number one, the Islamic Brotherhood. I mean, Obama didn't feel like he felt like he was a little soft on them. Didn't do much, but Trump will take a harder stance. But then also they're really concerned about Iran and how Iran's really been changing everything in the Middle East, and they're hoping that Trump will take a harder stance against Iran, and that will help Egypt a lot. So anyway, just
we need to create some sort of balance of power, and not chaos. I mean, that's what Trump will do. And also, if he follows the America First policy and doesn't get involved, and this is absolutely necessary, and sort of pulls out of the Middle East to a large extent, doesn't try to fill around in internal disputes, then things will be a lot better. That's why, like my General Sisi is happy about it, Bashar al-Assad's happy about it. What's her name? Maram Solsi, the Syrian girl on Twitter, she's very optimistic about it. She said right before the election, she said, "I'm a Muslim, I'm from Syria. Let me explain to you why I want Trump more than Clinton, because we know exactly what we're getting with Hillary Clinton. You can expect more of ISIS, more of Al-Qaeda, but with Trump, hopefully this will be something different, and we won't have to worry so much about regime change and terrorism and so forth."
Yeah, my question is too. I have several friends that are Muslim converts, and they live in the West, but it seems like they think that if you call, if you draw attention to Islamic terrorism, if you call it Islamic and you attach, the religion to it, then they're afraid that the people, I guess they're afraid that things will turn against them. I mean, it'll turn against all Muslims. But then there's a thinking that if you don't single out the radicals and extremists and so forth, then that actually isn't going to help the moderates, because everything gets kind of muddy, and no one really knows who are the extremists, who are not, what do they believe, and you won't be able to differentiate anymore between the radical and the moderate. So which approach and what strategy actually helps the moderates more?
Well, that's a big question. Okay, there's quite a few points here to bear in mind. I will start off with my oft-repeated point about it's better for Muslims not to be living there in the first place. It's better for Muslims to be living in the Muslim world. That's for starters. Number two, the fact that these radicals or extremists or terrorists, right, they come from the oldest theological breakaway cult known as the Khawarij, right? These people have always been the enemies of the Orthodox majority throughout history. This is how it's always been. And Orthodox Muslims have had to fight them in every century, as was prophesied. They've had to deal with them. They've had to go to war with them. And pretending now that we've gone through some interdimensional membrane and now the rules are different and we should unite with these people for the sake of unity and for the sake of peace. No, it's not going to work. It's not going to bear any fruit whatsoever. I mean, there's one woman I actually saw. I saw her. Her name's Sabah Ahmed. She actually was one of the Muslim supporters of Trump. She created some organization called Republicans for Trump. And she appeared on CNN, and she totally shocked them completely. The actual news anchors had their jaws dropped. But she said that why should we look at Trump as being Islamophobic when what Trump is really saying is he says he doesn't want ISIS and Al-Qaeda types entering the United States. So he said, so why should we as Muslims want them? Right? We don't want ISIS in this country. We don't want Al-Qaeda in this country. He wants to keep them out. So why shouldn't we be with him? Because it's like the point you're saying. If you're going to get all upset because Trump wants to keep out terrorists, and the question is, okay, well, what side are you on? I mean, what do you want them inside the United States? Do you want them to get in? Do you want them to commit terrorist acts? It doesn't make. If you can't make that distinction, and for Sunni Muslims, it's really, really important, because you have to remember, again, this cult, the Khawarij, which now manifests itself in ISIS and Al-Qaeda, this cult, their main enemy is Sunni Muslims. They'll stab you in the back the moment they have the chance. You do not give them leeway. You do not give them quarter. You have to preach against them and you have to fight against them as and when necessary. So it's a completely failed strategy based on this wishful thinking of we can all unite and get along, but it's not going to work. It's not going to bear any fruit, ever. Does that answer your question, or is there something else you want to?
Oh no, I think that's pretty good. I mean, I lean more towards. I think it hurts. The biggest enemy of the radicals is actually, or the people who are suffering the most by the radicals are actually the Muslims.
Yeah.
There's some Christians out there too, but it seems like the people who are feeling most of the brunt of it are Muslims. In Syria, so this article here is saying that Trump may kind of be more supportive towards Putin in Russia, and maybe be a little bit more open toward keeping Assad in power. So I wonder what's the kind of issue there. I mean, because obviously you have ISIS fighting Assad, so you don't want ISIS, but apparently I think with the Obama administration they didn't want Assad either. They wanted to overthrow him. But what do you think is going to change there?
They wanted Assad out because of this pipeline deal, right? There's Gulf countries that want to have a pipeline going through Syria into Turkey. That's what it all comes down to. Because at the beginning of the Arab Spring, there was this hope that Assad would sign on to this pipeline deal. And that's why he was referred to as a moderate and a reformer and blah blah blah. But as soon as he changed his mind and said, "No, I'm going to go for an alternative pipeline deal and do a pipeline deal with Iraq and Iran and Russia," then all of a sudden he was the big bad beast of the Middle East, and they had to get rid of him. So, but it should be clear now to anyone who follows the news that here we are 5 years later, almost 6. We're approaching 6 years now of the Arab Spring. Bashar al-Assad is still there. If it were true that he were so horribly unpopular, and he himself made this point, if it were true that he himself were so unpopular, then his people would have joined rebel groups or formed rebel groups and taken him out by now, but they haven't done so. So clearly he has the support of the majority of the Syrian people, even if it's only 51% or whatever it is. He clearly has the support of the majority of the Syrian people. There's even a nun called Mother Agnes, she's based in a monastery or nunnery in Damascus, I believe, and she's been to the United States to give lectures and explain that the Syrian revolution is more of a foreign invasion than a local uprising. It's more about these are fighters from other Arab countries being shipped in, parachuted in with weapons from the West. So that's what's really going.
It wasn't a real revolution.
It wasn't a real revolution, and the fact is that if we want to get rid of ISIS now, Bashar al-Assad, obviously he's far from perfect. He has lots of flaws, but the clear thing is that just like Iraq and just like Libya, is that the alternative to him is going to be ISIS or Al-Qaeda. That's what it's going to be. So, like, what would you rather have? Would you rather have a dictator who creates stability, or would you rather have anarchy under these terrorists? What's it going to be? And again, as mentioned before, according to Imam al-Ghazali and the other theologians and so forth in our history, tyranny is always preferred to anarchy. Tyranny is tyranny, but it's better than anarchy because under tyranny you can live, you can function, you can get things done, you can have access to food and so forth. Under anarchy, it's complete chaos. Yeah. Okay, so I think that's enough to cover. We could go on for more and talk about other things, but I think we'll save that for another time because we don't want these podcasts to be too long. My last two have been over an hour.
How long was that?
We're now at about 34 minutes.
That's perfect. I think eventually getting to 20, people could start
short, pithy, digestible.
Yeah, just new information.
Okay. So should we stop there?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I will.